Hey, before you start listening, I wanted to apologize for some of the audio in these episodes. If I had known at the time that I was going to turn this into a podcast, I would have done things differently. Some of the stories might not be in the order they should be, and some of the audio might cut in and out. This is because I had to edit out our private conversations. I'm grateful for the opportunity I had to be able to visit with Janice over the last few years and hear her story. She's an amazing storyteller and has a really neat story to share. I hope you all enjoy it as much as I did.
I was diagnosed in 2000. Well, in 1984, you didn't have down with lupus. And then I think it's 2000. I went to National Jewish Hospital in Denver. And I spent a month there. And I was pretty sick. And they diagnosed a group of more autoimmune diseases. So the lupus and the multiple sclerosis and the celiacs are all part of this autoimmune group. But I have scleroderma, Raynaud's, Sojourns, and CVID, and those are all autoimmune. And they diagnosed those while I was there in the hospital. And then this was long before I was diagnosed with scleroderma, was when we were in Alabama. So that was 1979. I was in the wheelchair, and we were about a block from the hospital. And it's a huge hospital there, and it was a teaching hospital on base, a great big hospital. And I was close enough that I thought I was able to take myself to the hospital for my appointments. And I had this condition that had started, and it's a side effect or one of the signs that you've got scleroderma, but nobody diagnosed it then, but it was called morphia. And they had a big group of doctors there that were specializing, I don't know what they call that, not residency, but when you're already a doctor, but you specialize in the group. The doctor that was seeing me, he said, do you care if I bring in 6 more doctors to look at this? I said, well, yeah, I guess that's okay. And I'm totally naked, and I'm not skinny. I got a lot to me, and they were all pushing on the skin, and I had a condition called morphia, and it's from the scleroderma. But I ended up, my naked picture, except for my face, is in a medical book because of this condition. And so the skin, my skin, except for up the side of my face and my right shoulder, anyway, the skin was hardening and shiny. And so Uncle Ed every night had to rub my whole body with steroid cream and wrap it in saran wrap. And that, we said we should have bought stock in saran wrap. I mean, you can't imagine how many boxes of saran wrap we went through. So that's just a little tidbit. That was really funny.
Oh my gosh.
So we had to laugh about that.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's all you can do. You can't change it, so just laugh.
But we laugh about the things that I've gotten into because of this. But I think I'd recognize my body, but I'm not positive because that was back in 1979. That's a little kinky. Having to be wrapped in saran wrap, but Scott and Michelle loved it too, so. Scott lived here the longest. we moved up here just before he turned 12, and Michelle had started college. But we'd been here probably at least 3 times a month, except for when Uncle Ed was working on his master's MBA, and that was all on weekends. So Michelle spent a lot of time up here. Well, anyway, when Scott was a baby, he was about 3 months old. So we put him in the baby buggy without the wheels. You used to could lift him out of there. And we put him in the wagon that had sides on it. Michelle was in the back of the trailer with Scott. She would have been 6. And I was handing her the bricks that we needed to move out of this field. And I picked up a couple of bricks and ran into maybe 10, 15 little baby mice. And I jumped in the back of that wagon, that trailer, shoved Michelle outside, and was just huddled down right next to the baby carriage. I don't know what I thought, how Scott was going to protect me, but she's on the ground thinking, what the dickens happened to me? And then she must have been about 12, so Scott would have been 6. And we'd just come back from Alabama, and we were up here and building a fence on the property across from us. And we were, I'd been in the hospital one of the many times, and but I was walking. But I got really tired, and so we had made piles to burn so that we could put up this new fence. Ed, Michelle, and Scott, Ed said, just sit right here and throw the sticks on the fire. You don't get up and try to do a lot. Let Michelle and Scott and I'll go down and do this brace post and the end. So I did, and I pick up the sticks and just throw them on the fire to keep the fire going. And I picked up a handful of sticks, and I picked up a snake. And the snake was just a little garter snake, but it doesn't matter. They scare the crap out of me. And this snake stuck out its tongue. You know how they had that long, slithery tongue?
Mm-hmm.
And so I threw the bundle of sticks and the snake and screamed. And they were in a Jeep going down to the field, straight line from me, windows up because it was chilly, and they heard me scream. So they turned around, and Ed thought that maybe because I would lose my vision when I'd have an exacerbation sometimes, and Ed thought I'd lost my vision again. And that poor snake, it didn't even slither off when I threw it. It just stayed right there. So you can tell how brave I am. And then we rented a property up on the hill down about 5 miles from us, but it's got the most gorgeous view of the Wallowas. So Scott and Ed and Michelle and I moved pipe every day on this field, and then we called it our family spiritual experience. We had to do it before church, so Michelle and I would have our showers. All we had to do was put on our dresses, and when we moved the pipe, you had to connect onto the risers. Well, never when we needed a shower. Always on Sunday, those stupid things blew, and we'd get all wet. And then on Saturdays, I'd pack a lunch. And so we'd get in the back of the truck, the yellow truck, And that was our tuna fish sandwiches, and we had a family spiritual experience in the yellow truck moving pipe. So that we always have to ride up there and check it out. Oh yeah, Scott and I, we built a lot of fence, and we did all the corrals. We built the corrals down at the ranch, and the fences around where we bring the cattle in. Well, we were setting ties. Scott would lift them in, and I'd shovel the cement and rocks in and pat it down while he'd keep it level. Well, we went to do this one. I think we'd set maybe 3 or 4, and it's right there in front of the house there where Ed's mom and dad live. And we smelled a skunk, and Scott went to drop the tie in, and there was a skunk down in there. So we come back up here to our house, get a 22, go back. Scott must have got off, I don't know, 6, 7 shots down in this hole without looking down in it. And this skunk, it did die, but it sprayed. Oh my gosh, we smelled so bad. And I was shoveling like crazy. But the tie is still in, and I guess it didn't do too much damage. But we just had a lot of fun experiences working together. We would tell the future America about ranching and farming that there's not a better way to raise kids than on a ranch, because they have so many opportunities to be responsible. Like Uncle Ed started driving a tractor when he was 5. His dad had put him on the tractor and said, head for that power pole while I feed, or while you're disking, or at 5. Well, gosh, we would let our kids do that today. Somebody would take a picture of us and turn us in.
Mm-hmm.
It's expensive for young people to get into farming.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the property is willed to you, or they've made gobs of money and can afford to set up a kid in it, to buy the equipment and buy the property is just astronomical today. But I think any opportunity, just see what you guys did and your kids are doing now with your dad and the sheep. And they've been able to feed bummers and help what little bit they can. But you are also teaching them good work ethics. Well, and that's what Michelle, when she was here a couple of weeks ago, she said, I wouldn't trade one thing. I wouldn't trade one thing of my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
growing up. And she and Scott they took on a lot of responsibility, because she did pretty much all the cooking. She and Ed, when I would be down, and they did all the laundry and the cleaning. Scott was cleaning the bathrooms when he was 3. He can clean a toilet better than any woman. He can. And she taught him. I think even though they weren't raised here all the time, because my health has always been a mess, they had to take on a huge amount of responsibility that a lot of kids normally wouldn't have that. And Ed and I were talking about it. In our minds, they have more empathy. They had to grow up faster in a lot of ways. So, but she wouldn't trade it, and Scott said many times he wouldn't either. And they're sad that their kids don't have that. But it is in your blood.
It is.
Michelle loves the animals. Scott likes the farming, more of it, and the neat fences and the fields that are planted, and he'll help with the cattle if we need him to. That isn't his bucket of worms, is to be around the cattle and work them. She loves to do the vaccinations and branding, and in fact we almost, well, we've come pretty close to not keeping the yellow truck. I think we just put $900 into it, and then we put a new seat in it, new covering. But we weren't going to do that, and the kid says, "You can't." The grandkids, "You can't give that truck away. We need that truck. That's part of our lives. We all learned to drive on that truck." And so we fixed it up, and Uncle Ed still drives it every day. And before Richard and your Grandma Fancy were married, he wasn't even in dental school, I don't think. No, he was in dental school. He must have been in his first year. Anyway, we went to Flaming Gorge, and we'd come from Oklahoma. We'd put the fish on the side of the boat we'd rent and put our motor on it, and they would be on where you put the metal thing through their mouths, and then you just hang them over the side in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had all of our, she'd give them raisins and marshmallows, and she'd stuff them down their throats, the fish. and this is how stupid we were as parents. So Grandpa and Grandma and your grandpa and Edna and Michelle are in this boat, and we tied the old metal tackle box to Michelle, thinking she wouldn't fall out of the boat. She wouldn't drown. So that was our life preserver for Michelle, was to tie her to the tackle box, which she'd go clear to the bottom if she'd ever fell out. But we had a lot of fun when Richard and I were 5th and 6th grade. We wanted to go pick cherries up in Mapleton, and they were paying, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 cents a pound to the pickers. I needed some better work shoes, so Mom and Dad bought me new shoes. Richard went in one spot in the orchard, and I was in a tree quite a ways from him. And I had the little bucket, and I was picking the cherries, and I fell out of the tree, ruined my new shoes. I had about a half of a bucket of cherries. I didn't make even 50 cents off the bucket. It cost Mom and Dad more for my broken arm, my shoes, so I never got to go pick cherries. I only had that one experience. And then when I was in 6th grade, we were at the Old Reef School. I was ice sliding on a hill before school. And you'd think as active as I was that I wouldn't have broke so much. But I did. I was climbing back up on the ice so I could come down from the top. And I fell down, and I broke my elbow and the bone next to it. So I go to the lunchroom, the bone's sticking out of my right elbow. So Mom gets off work. She calls Dad. He gets off work. They come. They take me to the hospital, and they had to cast it. And back in those days, the casts were pretty heavy. Anyway, they put my arm in a position to where my hand would be right over my heart, so it was bent. And I can't remember how many months. It must have been about 4 months that I had to wear the cast, because when they took the cast off, that's the way my hand stayed. I couldn't bend my arm. And so the physical therapy that Dr. Hughes had me do was I carried a 10-pound bucket of honey, and I started with it up on my chest, and I carried that all day. So I did break my arm a couple of times, too. I broke my leg about 3 times. And you know what's interesting? It was always on the right side. The exacerbations with the MS, that's the side that goes the first. I'll start out, sometimes it starts out just dragging the foot, but that's the weakest side. Yeah, so I'm sure my mother and dad hated the phone call. So what did be great now? So when Scott was in high school, well, before that, Leona and Vernon had I want to say 1972 Dodge, 2-door Dodge, yellow and white. And so Scott, when we first got up here, he would drive it. He didn't have a license. He was only 11 when it started. He would drive it to go move pipe up here for Martha Jane. And we always referred to it as the yellow Ferrari. And it was a real junker. And we would go to all of his basketball games. And it's such a small school, we'd have to drive 3 and 4 hours to the games. So we were coming home from a game. They stopped at a restaurant, and we were already in there. We didn't know they were going to stop. And so we weren't going to get home till like 12, 1 o'clock at night. And then they were going to drop Scott off in Haines rather than have to go to North Powder and pick him up. So we said, and there was another team in there, and girls were flirting with Scott like crazy. And Ed said, we'll leave you the yellow Ferrari in front of the store. You just drive yourself home and let us know that you're home. And he said, I don't want to drive the yellow Ferrari. Can't you leave me the K car? And Ed said, no, you need to drive the yellow Ferrari. So we left. We were just dying laughing. And these girls said, you got a Ferrari and you don't want to drive it? What's the matter with you? So Scott kind of ate that up. He certainly didn't say to them, no, it's an old Dodge Star. So, yeah, we called it the yellow Ferrari. And then we had an old car 57. We paid $250 for it from the school district, and it had 57 written on the side. So he drove that. Ed would drive it back and forth to work, and then when it was pipe moving, Ed would drive the yellow truck, and Scott would take this old car 57. So we were at Mountain Home Air Force Base, and it was Halloween, and Ed had to fly all the time. He didn't ever have to go trick-or-treating. So it would have been the Halloween of 1972, Halloween of 1973, because Scott was about 15 months old. And I had him dressed up as a clown. I was dressed up as a clown. Michelle was dressed up as a clown. And then our good friend, Sandy Pittard, her husband was flying, and her 3 kids. And we went trick-or-treating on our street. And we are both really naive. Me more naive than she was. I did not know that that they put whiskey into apple cider, hot apple cider, and it was so cold. Oh, it was bitter cold that Halloween. And we were having a ward party after maybe an hour or so after. So we went trick-or-treating on our street. And we were down a couple of houses, and they said, do you want a cup of hot cider? And of course we said yes. So we each drank like a red Solo cup, about that size of this spiked apple cider. Well, anyway, we ended up, as we went around, we either got 4 or 5 cups of apple cider that was spiked. I don't remember driving to the church in our big station wagon, and I had all these pies and cookies and cakes. It was a huge, great big old station wagon. And they said that I backed up the sidewalk of the church to the back door. And I got white clown makeup on, but I guess when I got in there, because I was so drunk, they didn't know it. People unloaded the car, but they said my face was pink. The clown makeup was pink. Well, the next morning, I was really sick. I was throwing up, and I felt terrible. And Ed was down on the flight line, and he called me, and he said, you don't have the flu or anything. You got a hangover. And she was my counselor in Relief Society.
Oh, my gosh. That's
yeah, we were
funny.
really drunk. I don't know how if I'd have had any idea, I don't know how I drove.
I know.
The church was off base.
Yeah.
I had to go through the security gate to get off base of the church, and through the security gate to get back on.
And your face?
Yeah, so our Relief Society president now, she was kind of discouraged, and she had called me, and I said, Emily, you're doing a great job. Let me tell you about being Relief Society president. When you get discouraged, think about being drunk. So she'll text me once in a while. She says, I just laughed. She just laughed at it. So, yeah, that's a story maybe our grandkids need to know.
Oh, yeah. That's funny. That's a good one.
The one time, maybe I told you, Michelle said, she must have been about 15. Danielle was 4. And we were down, and Michelle had been saying for a couple of weeks, I know exactly what I'm getting for Christmas. And I said, no, you don't. Yes, I do. I know exactly everything I'm getting. So she kept that up. So your mom and Danielle and Matt and Jared and Scott and Michelle would put their stockings out. This is my place for my stuff. Well, in Michelle's stocking, we filled it with coal. And she got nothing on the chair. Nothing. And everybody else had all their goodies all piled up. Well, Danielle started to cry when she saw that. And she came over and put her arms around Michelle. You can have some of my stuff since Santa wasn't very nice to you. And she was crying. I just said, I just felt so bad. So I had to explain to her that Santa had left her stuff, that Uncle Ed and I were just playing a joke on her. I had no idea it would upset Danielle so far. So bad. She's just stubborn.
She was little.
Okay, so I love to golf, but I'm a terrible golfer. So when we were in Oklahoma, I took lessons with the pro at the clubhouse, and he said, this is what he said to me, Janice, you get worse every swing you do practicing. So no more practice shots. Get up, hit the ball, and go on. So the golfer, or the pro, he just said, you know how you get up and you eyeball it and you do these little practice swings, and he said, you just get worse. So, but I would golf, and on a hole number 2, I don't know if it's on all golf courses, but the golf courses the few that I played, hole number 2 was water. You had to get over water. I never got over water. One of the reasons I didn't in Oklahoma, there are snakes, water snakes. And I was terrified. Well, Grandpa and Grandma bought me a floater ball. So it would go in the water and it would float. But then they got me a retriever. So it was this extended out, it'd go out 15 feet, and I could retrieve it. Even when I did that, I'd lose the floater ball because I would hit it so hard, it would drive into the mud on the side. So that's the kind of golfer I am. I enjoy it, but I'm not very good. And then when we lived in Oklahoma, when Ed first started pilot training and I wasn't pregnant, I got a job and I was personnel manager over 3 big department stores in the area. And my boss, Mrs. Cherry, I can't remember her first name, she got cancer, and she played on the operations bowling team, and she said, would you fill in for me while I go through this surgery, and at least for the rest of this year? And so I thought, oh, okay, I can do that. Well, this is the kind of bowler I am. I got up, and you bring your arm back to put your ball down. You bring your arm clear back, and I let it go. Probably the second time on the team, I let the ball go, and it hit a guy behind me and knocked him out.
Oh my gosh.
So that's the kind of bowler I am. And Grandpa and Grandma, if Richard and Nancy got something, Ed and I got exactly the same thing. So one year they gave us golf clubs. One year they gave us bowling balls and shoes. One year we got a set of dishes. They were all exactly the same. Mine was black and red. Ed's was red and black. We were down. I was sick. They had Scott and Michelle while I was in the hospital. And Dad wanted to show Scott, because he was tall enough at 2 that he could pee in the toilet. And he says, rather than sit down, Dad had his pajamas on, and everybody was ready for bed. And he said, Scott, come here, I'm going to show you. Well, as he was showing him, Scott started going, and instead of putting it in the toilet, he peed all down the legs and feet of Dad's feet. He turned and faced him. And so Dad said he was never trained, and I don't think he helped with Matt and Jared at all. He said, I'm not doing that for a kid. When I'd have exacerbations with my MS, and I couldn't stand, Ed would put me in the shower on the floor. And I hate to be naked, absolutely hate to be naked. And so we tried to involve Scott doing other things. And Mr. Nosy himself comes whipping around the corner in Mountain Home, and the shower was right there. And he said, just as plain as day, he must have been about 4. Anyway, he said, those boobies don't look like Grandma's boobies.
Oh.
Grandma's come in a box and go squish, squish. So he had been down to Mom and Dad's, and he watched through the crack of the door of Mom taking off her prostheses from the double mastectomy and carefully put them in the box, in the drawer, in that dresser, the vanity. Yeah. And so Scott watched her, and then evidently when she came out and was in the TV room down there, he went in and got the boobies out and felt them, said they got warm and they go squish, squish. And so the whole time he's talking about this. He's doing these animations with his hands.